What if I told you there's a mistake hidden right in the middle of Forrest Gump? One that even the biggest fans and film critics completely missed for decades. This isn't some background extra or continuity slip. This blooper is right in front of your face, in a scene everyone remembers. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. So why did no one catch it? Until now. Stick around, because we're diving deep into the one Forrest Gump moment that breaks the illusion and reveals something you were never supposed to notice. To this day, Forrest Gump holds a special place in the hearts of film lovers around the world. Its emotional storytelling, unforgettable lines, and Tom Hanks's performance have cemented it as a cinematic classic. But for those who think they know everything about the film, think again. There are secrets buried beneath the surface of its most iconic moments, from visual effects that changed Hollywood forever to surprise cameos that went undetected for years. One particular oversight, so big and so obvious once you see it, went unnoticed for decades. Let's dive into the behind-the-scenes magic that made Forrest Gump more than just a movie. It became a phenomenon. Take Lieutenant Dan, for example. Gary Sinise's portrayal of the wounded Vietnam veteran was both heartbreaking and uplifting. But did you ever stop to wonder how they made it look like he had no legs? At a time when CGI was still finding its footing, the crew pulled off what seemed impossible. Sinise wore blue fabric around his legs while in scenes, and those sections were digitally removed in post-production. It's a detail you might overlook because it's done so flawlessly. But it wasn't just the effects that made the character resonate. Sinise brought a raw intensity to Dan's emotional transformation, taking the audience from the chaos of war to the quiet strength of recovery. His pain felt real, his redemption earned. That arc is one of the reasons fans continue to revisit the film. And yet, for all the emotion packed into that character, the technology supporting him quietly broke new ground. There's something endlessly fascinating about how Forrest Gump walked through American history like he belonged there. One scene in particular has a twist that flew under the radar for years. Remember when young Forrest dances for Elvis Presley? The actor portraying Elvis physically nailed the look and mannerisms. But the voice you hear? It wasn't his. That voice belonged to none other than Kurt Russell. Here's the kicker. Russell had played Elvis years earlier in a TV movie, and director Robert Zemeckis called him in to redo the voice because the original recording didn't quite work. Russell agreed, and didn't even know if anyone else on the production was aware of the swap. It wasn't until 2016 that he casually confirmed it in an interview. That revelation reframed the entire scene. Russell had never sung as Elvis in his own biopic, but here he was, slipping into the legend's voice like it was second nature. Just think, one of the most watched movies of all time kept that secret for over a decade. Now let's talk about a presidential moment that bends time just enough to fit the story. Forrest meeting President John F. Kennedy is one of those surreal intersections of fiction and reality. In the movie, he's honored as an All-American football player and invited to the White House. Historically, though, there's a problem. The All-America team announcement came weeks after JFK's assassination, so technically, Forrest couldn't have been there. But logic isn't the point here. The film doesn't aim to be historically airtight. It's about a man who somehow ends up everywhere history happens, despite being entirely fictional. This moment is more about the emotional journey than the literal truth. That's the magic of Forrest Gump. It lets you suspend disbelief just long enough to imagine the impossible. Then there's that bench. You know the one, where Forrest waits with a box of chocolates and spills his life story to anyone who'll listen. That bench isn't just a prop. It's a character in its own right. The scene was shot in Savannah, Georgia, in Chippewa Square. To get the perfect angle, the city's traffic had to be reversed just for the shoot. The production team used 4 identical benches to capture all the angles, but only one survived as a permanent landmark. That bench now lives in the Savannah History Museum, shielded behind glass, drawing thousands of visitors each year who want to stand where Forrest once sat. The others? Lost to collectors or tucked away in private hands, their value rising with each passing year. It's incredible how something as ordinary as a bench became one of the most beloved icons in movie history. During Forrest's epic run across the country, a sequence that became symbolic of resilience and escape, there's a blink and you'll miss it detail. As he jogs past a barbershop, a news report plays inside announcing that President Jimmy Carter has suffered from heat exhaustion. It's a real event that happened in 1979. But here's where it gets murky. Forrest begins his journey in 1976, 3 years earlier, before Carter even became president. The timeline doesn't quite line up, but rather than a mistake, it feels like a creative liberty taken for emotional resonance. The film isn't a documentary. It's a fable, a dreamlike stroll through American memory. Moments like these don't have to add up perfectly. They just have to feel right. There's one more detail that's often overlooked, even though it's heard throughout the entire film: Forrest's voice. That soft Southern drawl wasn't just a character choice. It was modeled after the young actor who played Forrest as a child. Tom Hanks listened closely to the way the boy spoke and decided to mimic it to keep a consistent tone. Instead of asking the child to match Hanks's delivery, Hanks adapted to him. It was a quiet decision, but one that brought a striking authenticity to the role. It reminded audiences that Forrest's identity was deeply rooted in his upbringing and his worldview. Simple, honest, and profoundly sincere. And believe it or not, these were just the surface layers. The deeper you look into Forrest Gump, the more you uncover, and every new detail only makes you love it more. Tom Hanks didn't just act the part of Forrest Gump, he lived and breathed it. The accent? That slow, deliberate Southern drawl that became instantly iconic? It wasn't born in a dialect coach's studio. Instead, Hanks took a wildly unconventional route. He listened closely to young Michael Connor Humphreys, the Mississippi native who played the childhood version of Forrest, and patterned his own voice directly after the boy's natural cadence. That choice grounded the character in emotional truth and created an uncanny vocal harmony between the younger and older Forrest. It was a decision few actors would dare attempt, but it paid off, giving audiences a seamless transition that felt startlingly real. That's not just method acting, that's transformation in its purest form. It also sparked a quiet magic between Hanks and Humphreys. The collaboration was subtle, but vital. Hanks wasn't trying to imitate a Southern accent. He was embodying a young boy's innocence, turning it into the adult voice of a man whose simple wisdom would touch millions. And critics noticed. The Academy noticed. Hanks walked away with the Oscar for Best Actor. And young Humphreys earned a Young Artist Award for laying the groundwork for one of the most beloved characters in modern cinema. That's how legends are built. Not in spotlight moments, but in details most people never even see coming. But perhaps one of the boldest moves Hanks made wasn't even on screen. It was in the fine print of his contract. Instead of taking a typical actor's paycheck for Forrest Gump, he negotiated something far riskier: percentage points of the film's profit. In other words, if the movie flopped, he'd walk away with next to nothing. But if it soared, the sky was the limit. At the time, this was a gamble of epic proportions. No one could have guessed just how seismic Forrest Gump would become. But Hanks had a gut feeling, just like Forrest always did. The film ended up grossing nearly $680 million worldwide. That decision to bet on the movie, rather than a fixed salary, netted Hanks an estimated $65 million. It wasn't just a payday, it was a masterstroke. And doesn't it feel poetic? Forrest Gump, the man who stumbled into success without ever chasing it, somehow mirrored his creator's real-life instincts. It's the kind of behind-the-scenes twist that makes you look at the whole film differently. Then there's Bubba. You can't think of Forrest without remembering Bubba Blue, the gentle, shrimp-obsessed soul played by Mykelti Williamson. But here's something few fans know. Bubba's distinctive look, especially that exaggerated lower lip, wasn't Williamson's own. It was a prosthetic, painstakingly designed to capture the character's memorable appearance. The team didn't just slap on a fake lip and call it a day. They worked to blend it so naturally into Williamson's face that audiences never noticed it was artificial. And it worked. Too well. Some casting directors even believed that was his real face, which ironically hurt Williamson's career for a while. Still, that one performance left an indelible mark. Bubba, soft-spoken and endlessly kind, brought warmth and humanity to a story often laced with tragedy. And despite the prosthetic, Williamson's emotion shone through. Proof that great acting transcends any special effect. Here's a twist that almost feels like movie magic itself. The fictional Bubba Gump Shrimp Company didn't stay fictional for long. In 1996, just 2 years after Forrest Gump hit theaters, a real-life Bubba Gump Shrimp Co. opened in Monterey, California. It wasn't just a restaurant, it was an homage to a film that had captured the hearts of a generation. Today, there are over 40 locations worldwide, each packed with memorabilia, quotes, and menu items inspired by the film. But perhaps the most unbelievable chapter? One night in 2000, a young man named Chris Pratt was waiting tables at a Bubba Gump in Maui. With charm and humor, he served a director who saw something special in him. That meeting launched Pratt's Hollywood career. Think about it. Without Forrest Gump, we might never have had Guardians of the Galaxy or Jurassic World. That's not just a restaurant, it's a ripple effect. And speaking of unexpected settings, would you believe the film's gritty Vietnam War scenes weren't shot in Southeast Asia, but on a golf course in South Carolina? You read that right. Thanks to masterful CGI and clever practical effects, a pristine course was transformed into a convincing war-torn jungle. The production even brought in extra palmetto trees to sell the illusion. The result? A Vietnam so immersive, most audiences never suspected the truth. Filming also took place on Fripp and Hunting Islands, idyllic locations that, with the right camera angles and visual tricks, became believable battlegrounds. The magic of cinema turned leisure grounds into landscapes of chaos and brotherhood, blending beauty and brutality in every frame. Now let's rewind to one of America's most charged historical moments, the 1963 standoff at the University of Alabama. Forrest finds himself standing on the sidelines of this real-life event, watching Governor George Wallace attempt to prevent 2 black students, Vivian Malone and James Hood, from enrolling. It was a chilling snapshot of the civil rights movement. And what made it even more powerful? The film wove Forrest's fictional life into real history with such precision, it blurred the line between story and reality. When federal troops intervened, under orders from President Kennedy, Wallace had no choice but to step aside. The moment marked a turning point in American history, and Forrest Gump managed to capture it without turning it into a lecture. It was shown through Forrest's innocent eyes, making it feel all the more raw and revealing. Incredibly, the original script had even grittier ambitions. The first drafts included a controversial detail. Forrest and Bubba's entire platoon in Vietnam was to be comprised of soldiers with lower-than-average IQs, a nod to an actual but now abandoned military practice. But after pushback from the Army, the script was changed. Still, the film retained the emotional power of those scenes, earning praise from historians for its hauntingly accurate portrayal of jungle warfare and ambush tactics. And here's a final gem. Remember the heartbreaking bus scene where young Forrest is rejected, until Jenny offers him a seat? Those kids who refused to move over? They weren't just actors. They were the children of director Robert Zemeckis and Tom Hanks himself. That small cameo added a personal layer to a deeply emotional scene, one that every viewer remembers long after the credits roll. Because in Forrest Gump, even the smallest moments are packed with meaning, and nothing is ever just by chance. Tom Hanks once called it lightning in a bottle. But behind Forrest Gump's charm and whimsy lies a tapestry of missed chances, private struggles, and behind-the-scenes decisions that could have changed everything. One of the most tender sparks in the story begins when young Jenny invites Forrest to sit beside her on the school bus. It seems simple, but that one act rewrote both of their lives. Forrest remembers Jenny as the first person who made him feel truly seen. Her kindness cut through his isolation like sunlight. But few knew the real storms Jenny was weathering at home, her childhood scarred by loss and an abusive guardian. It makes you wonder, How many Hollywood stories do we love without knowing the price paid behind the scenes? Here's where the story jolts unexpectedly. Imagine this. Tom Hanks, one of America's most beloved actors, wasn't even the first choice for the role. Travolta, Murray, and Chevy Chase all passed. And years later, Travolta confessed in a candid interview that it still haunts him. That one decision, turning down Forrest Gump, was like walking away from a lottery ticket. David Alan Grier and Ice Cube, too, walked from roles that would have defined them. Ice Cube admitted he didn't feel right playing a character with a disability. Dave Chappelle, fearing stereotypes, declined, and later laughed at how wrong he'd been about the film's impact. Sometimes the roles that shape pop culture almost never make it to screen. That's not just trivia. It's a wake-up call to every actor standing at a crossroads. As audiences watched Forrest run across America, inspired, emotional, and barefoot, few realized the studio wanted to cut that entire sequence. Paramount saw the price tag and hesitated, but director Robert Zemeckis and Hanks believed in that moment so deeply, they personally funded it. That's right, Hanks paid out of pocket to bring us one of the most iconic scenes in cinema. It's hard to forget the dusty road, the crowd of strangers following, and Forrest's simple declaration, "I think I'll go home now." That moment wasn't just cinematic gold. It was financial risk wrapped in creative belief, and it paid off big time. Speaking of payoff, Tom Hanks is more than an Oscar-winning actor. He's built a quiet empire that reflects his thoughtful personality and long-term planning. At his peak, Hanks owned a rare Aston Martin DB6, a Tesla Model S for everyday use, and a beloved vintage Fiat 126P gifted by Poland. His collection of luxury watches includes a Patek Philippe Calatrava and a Cartier Tank Solo. Real estate? Think Pacific Palisades estate, a $26 million compound, and a Greek island hideaway. He owns a Bombardier Challenger 300 private jet for international travel. Business-wise, Hanks co-founded Playtone, the production company behind hits like Mamma Mia and Band of Brothers. He's invested in tech startups and green energy initiatives. Insurance? He's rumored to hold career loss of income coverage, multiple real estate protection policies, and health policies tailored for high-risk filming locations. The lesson here? Hanks lives by balance. Spend when it counts, insure what matters, and diversify like a CEO. His financial life is a masterclass in acting with heart and thinking with strategy. But let's circle back to Forrest Gump's emotional resonance. Remember the feather? That delicate drifting symbol of fate? Many assumed it was CGI, but it was a real feather filmed against blue screens and painstakingly edited to float just so. It shows the care that went into every frame. And when that feather returned in the final scene, after Forrest waves goodbye to his son, you felt the full circle closed. It's subtle filmmaking that speaks louder than dialogue ever could. Then there's the moment you wouldn't believe unless it came straight from set. Tom Hanks filmed all those high-energy football scenes while battling the flu. He was sprinting back and forth with a fever, pushing through because the character demanded it. The physical toll was real, but Hanks never let it show. Forrest's college football arc may seem like a quirky detour, but it mirrored real legends who came from nothing and ran toward everything. And Hanks brought that spirit to life, sick or not. Here's something that will truly blow your mind. A sequel was once in the works, based on Winston Groom's 1995 follow-up novel. The second story took a wildly meta turn. In it, Forrest wrestles with the existence of the Forrest Gump movie. He criticizes how it portrayed him, and even has a fictional meeting with Tom Hanks. It's bizarre, surreal, and maybe brilliant, but the project was quietly shelved. In the sequel, Forrest is broke, Bubba Gump Shrimp is no more, and he's mopping floors at a nightclub. His journey spirals into encyclopedia hustling and desperate fatherhood. It had all the ingredients for another cultural moment, but it never made it past development. Maybe some stories are too sacred to revisit. Maybe Forrest's run was meant to end exactly where it did. And now, the most unexpected twist of all. The most quoted line in the entire movie? My name is Forrest Gump. People call me Forrest Gump. It wasn't in the script. It was an on-the-spot ad-lib by Hanks, a slip that struck gold. That line, so oddly sincere, captured the spirit of the whole character. It reminded audiences that greatness doesn't always come from planning. It sometimes comes from just showing up, fully present. So as the credits roll on this classic, we're left with more than just memory. We're left with a profound truth. The best stories come from risk, heartbreak, and grace. Whether it's a feather caught on the wind or a missed role that changed everything, Hollywood never stops surprising us, and neither should we. And that's the wild truth behind Forrest Gump's biggest blooper, hidden in plain sight. If that blew your mind, smash that like button. Drop your favorite movie goof in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more hidden Hollywood secrets coming your way. Next up, we're uncovering the classic Titanic mistake James Cameron still defends to this day. Because in Hollywood, even perfection comes with a blooper reel.